Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Jones here with a maximum alert. Last week we were contacted by Army personnel, by MPs, and then by Air Force MPs about United Nations advertisement solicitations that were being hung up in the barracks to recruit them for gun confiscation during collapse in America. That happened about a week and a half ago almost. Then in the middle of last week, we were sent the United Nations career advertisement that just went up by the same people saying, look, we've looked into it, here it is, for during a collapse, gun confiscation to stabilize things. And the RAND Corporation came up with a plan 20 years ago for this National Stability Police Force. This is what the UN does worldwide. They've taken everybody else's guns. You understand? This is what they do. And it's in their own documents, they want it. Now it's broken. Now we were waiting on the report, not to confirm it, but to get undercover information, which we're getting right now. And it shows how great the alternative media is. The DrudgeReport.com already had it last night, that the hit the fan plan with Max Slavo broke it. It's awesome. We are ferreting out even more, confirming the specifics, but they admit in their own career plan, right here, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration officer. These are commanders to carry this out, and it gets into all of it. Small arms disarmament, their mission, they've got to have serious command, from third world takeover operations that they've done in other countries. Here's the article on Infowars.com, mirrored Max Slavo, and he goes through it all. I've got Paul Watson doing a more detailed article showing the whole history of it. Now, let me show you this. We broke this a few months ago, so did the New American. DOD directive provides for a federal authority in quelling civil unrest. Then, look who ends up carrying it. The London Guardian just a few days ago, Pentagon preparing for mass civil breakdown. Type in civil unrest, click Google News, ladies and gentlemen, and you will see this literally everywhere. The armored vehicles, the drones, the tanks, the preparations, using the border collapse that's just begun like a tsunami. Sheriffs have called it like Katrina every day, to bring down those areas and then to basically bring in civil emergency or martial law. Food prices are doubling. Everything is starting to get more and more hardcore worldwide and here. This is the globalist collapse, Cloward and Piven, problem, reaction, solution. But getting this out and exposing that they're preparing for it will cause a public debate, and they will fail. That's why they want to deny the NSA spying and deny all the things they're doing and deny they're funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS, because then there can't be a debate about it. We're going to force the debate. We are the real media. We are the true media, not the state-run media. And this stuff is getting out regardless of what happens to InfoWars. There's Drudge and so many other great outfits out there that know the truth and care about freedom. And great job to Mac getting this out. Again, we've got a big story on this with video, audio we're working on right now. It'll all be covered on the radio today, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Infowars.com. If you're watching this transmission, you are the resistance.
Report is up on Alex's YouTube channel, the Alex Jones channel on YouTube. You can see that in full, and we're going to talk to Paul Joseph Watson as soon as we come back about this. The article is United Nations seeks U.S.-based disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration specialists. And this is something that, as Alex pointed out, we were told that they're putting up job offerings, and now we see the actual posting. And the interesting thing about this is if you look at it, it says the duty station is New York. Paul, what do you think about that?
I think, although it's listed as New York, if you go on the UN's website, they talk about this DDR program, disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and it's currently active in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ivory Coast, and Haiti. So whereas it says it's based in New York, I think that's just where they're being trained, and the actual programs are based in Africa. But as Alex has said, again, these programs are dual use.
This is Alex Jones for InfoWarsLife.com. The latest in preparedness is now here. An electrically stabilized colloidal silver solution that can be added to both your home cabinet and preparedness pack alike. Concentrated to 30 parts per million. and what has been dubbed the survival silver solution. The new InfoWars Life Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver is the answer for you and your family, and it's entirely free of toxic artificial additives that are loaded into many products. The InfoWars Life Silver Bullet Silver is so powerful that it is concentrated into a 2-ounce bottle and is not recommended for extended continual use. This is not a low-grade formula. We are working with one of the top laboratory manufacturers in the United States to bring you the best form of colloidal silver using electrical processes within a base of deionized water for your preparedness storage or your home kitchen. Purchase your bottle of InfoWarsLife.com Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver today and find other amazing supplements at InfoWarsLife.com.
Joining me from the UK is Paul Joseph Watson. We've just been talking about this article and report that Alex put up. United Nations seeks U.S.-based disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration specialists. And of course, Paul, in context, we know that in 2012, as it points out in the article by Max Slavo, Obama, as well as Hillary Clinton, signed an agreement, the Small Arms Treaty. We've also seen a similar thing happen with the UN Arms Trade Treaty, where they try to stop the flow of arms across the border. I was there when they were trying to push that through in let's see, that was July of 2012. And they had just had the Fast and Furious arms smuggling thing blow up in their faces. I believe that they had set that up. As the New York Times pointed out, that was a false flag attack. That was a false flag attack on the Second Amendment. And they were trying to make a case that was going to peak right about that time, that we had this massive problem of guns flowing across the border into Mexico. So to control that, we needed to have massive registration like we've never seen before, details like we've never seen before here in America. That was what the UN Arms Trade Treaty was about. But it kind of blew up in their face when that agent got killed. And that was what happened in July. So then they postponed it till after the election. The night of the election, when it looked like they'd picked up some more Democrat seats, they said, we're going to revisit this in the spring. And when they came back in the spring, they finally did pass it as a body. Kerry said that, Secretary of State Kerry said that he wanted to go with that. But still, it hasn't gone through. The Senate has not ratified that, fortunately. And there's a lot of people who question legally whether a treaty can supersede the Constitution. So I don't know, but it certainly looks like the UN is spearheading this in multiple areas, not just the trading of arms, the movement of arms across borders, but also trying to confiscate arms within a country. And as you pointed out, even though this is in New York, you believe that this is for disarmament, demobilization, reintegration abroad, but there's nothing that I've seen that says that the UN wants to limit it just to being abroad. I think they would certainly love to see that happen in the United States, as they've been working for a long time.
Well, I mean, I don't think the majority of police in America will want to get involved in mass gun confiscation. I mean, that would be a total bloodbath. In fact, I think we've seen polls that evidence that in the past. So if they really wanted to do it, and it would be complete stupidity, but they would need some kind of foreign mercenary troops to do it. So, you know, I think that's why people remain concerned about the UN being involved in gun confiscation.
Yes.
One other thing that I wanted to touch on was this University of California professor Hamamoto contacted us, and he's warning about the illegal immigration influx being about, quote, the re-education of society. Mm-hmm. He said that it's part of a deliberate plot, quote, to exclude the American middle class from a UC education center and create a new demographic of largely immigrant or foreign national undergraduate population that can be re-educated from the ground up and controlled much more readily. So this is what we've been talking about for years, is that this illegal immigration push is not necessarily about, you know, creating jobs for people, right, or amnesty in terms of humanitarian aid like we now see with the Department of Homeland Security paying for them to be brought in. But it's about fundamentally shifting the foundation of society. It's about creating a voting bloc, and it's about the re-education of society, destroying that rugged individualism which defines America, creating a whole class, an underclass that knows no rights, has no history of freedom or liberty, and can easily be manipulated into following the dictates of the state. So for a professor from a liberal university, UC Davis, California, to come out with these quotes is quite a story, and he's coming out to us exclusively. So we hope to get him on the show probably next week, but this article is going up after the show ends today.
That's very true. Yes, thank you for joining us, Paul Joseph Watson from the UK. I believe, Paul, that that's precisely what's behind this. I think there's a tie with the FEMA Youth Corps with what he said he wanted to have. Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.
We were just talking to Paul Joseph Watson about a couple of articles that have gone up in the last yesterday and today. The one yesterday about the SWAT team raid in Florida against a lady where she was stripped naked. They have still not received any information as to why they were SWAT teamed. And then, of course, another article about the British now having their own fake towns to prepare against attacks and riots from their own citizens, as we've seen multiple places here in the United States. Of course, Fort A.P. Hill has the Asymmetric Warfare Center that Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs and I went through and filmed. A very chilling experience. And again, at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, the Marines have another facility. That one is really kind of targeted more towards rural and suburban America. They have neighborhoods, they have farms. Both of these look like Americana. The only thing that you would not typically associate with a small rural town was a very large mosque. And as I point out when we were talking, when Paul Joseph Watson and I were talking, that mosque is kind of positioned in a way so that if you drive past that training center, that's what you see from the road, because the Asymmetric Warfare Center is a secure area within a secure area. So you have to get into the fort, and then it is surrounded by high fences with concertina wire. We were let in by the security guard there, and it was amazing to walk around there. Very chilling thing to look at that, especially with the knowledge of how they have been training for domestic unrest. And now, as we see, as Alex Jones pointed out in the report that we had just before the top of the hour, as Alex Jones pointed out, we see this massive preparation over and over again for economic collapse. And of course, one of the reasons that they have given for economic collapse is a collapse of the borders. That is being done now. That is being done. The borders are being opened up and collapsed by Homeland Security. The same people who are militarizing our police, pushing us into a police state, equipping our police with equipment that is typically used in counterinsurgency wars abroad. Now, in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Cheryl Chumley about her book, Police State USA. She says it's a layman's guide to the latest and constitutional hits that this nation has taken. She uses recent examples from across the country to illustrate how technology, environmentalists, businesses, and politicians are stripping the American people of their God-given rights. So I'm anxious to talk to her. This is something that is, in a good way, starting to explode. Both people on the left and the right are starting to understand where this is headed. For the longest time, you only heard people like the John Birch Society 30 years ago talking about this. Alex Jones has been talking about this for decades. Now we've got not just conservatives and libertarians talking about it, but now you've got the ACLU and you've got The Guardian talking about the militarization of the police. That's an article that just came out today in The Guardian. Hopefully, people can stand back and see where this is going. This is not a left-right issue. And many times, as she's pointing out, this is a country where government is replacing God. You know, I see so many times that people who are conservatives would push back in favor of a lot of these draconian techniques and police state techniques that are being used because they were being done as part of the war on drugs. See, government's job is not to save people's souls. And that's essentially what you're talking about when you're talking about addiction. You're talking about a medical issue. You're talking about a spiritual issue, a psychological issue. That is not government's job. As we've said over and over again, you know, the people who have only a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you think that everything needs to be done by government, then you're going to wind up, by definition, with a police state. You're going to wind up trying to use government force to solve every problem. That's not the way every problem is solved. And there's a very sad story out of Seattle, Washington. Eric Holder is there. They just had a massive crackdown on some people, 5 individuals who were cracked down for medical marijuana, which is legal in the state of Washington. And yet the federal government says those laws don't apply here. Is that the state of where we are? Is that where people on the left want us to be? Is that where people on the right want us to be? Do we want to pursue this insane prohibition policy so much so that we will throw in jail people who use these things for medical purposes? Is that why we're doing this? Are we doing that to protect the big pharmaceutical companies? Are we doing it to protect the CIA's drug-running operations out of Afghanistan? Because, you know, it had fallen to 10% of the world's heroin supply. Then after we occupied it, it's back up to like 90% of the world's heroin supply in Afghanistan. We saw what was happening with the Iran-Contra affair, where the Republicans were running drugs and starting the crack cocaine addiction craze in California in order to fund their secret wars. This is something we need to all wake up. It's not a Republican versus Democrat, a left versus right thing. This is something we all need to wake up to and see where this is headed, because now it's not just the war on drugs, it's the war on terror. That's how they're justifying this police state. We've had some good news today. We've had a Supreme Court come out and say that the police may not search smartphones without a warrant. That's very important because we've seen that happening over and over again, but it leaves some glaring inconsistencies, of course, in our legal standing. Of course, the NSA is still going through our smartphones without warrants. They're going through our computers without warrants. They're looking at everything that we're doing without warrants. And so I'm glad to see that this was a unanimous decision. That's pretty amazing. It's very rare that they have a unanimous decision. That they supported the Fourth Amendment to say that the government needs to have a search warrant in order to go look at our personal effects, our person, our property, our house. That's something that needs to be applied to these violent SWAT team actions that are going on out there. And we also had another Supreme Court case that just came up. Actually, it's not a Supreme Court case. This was a state federal case where a federal court has struck down a no-fly list as unconstitutional. One of the first stories when I came to InfoWars was about a man, Wade Hicks, who got stuck trying to get to Japan. He was taken off of a Army plane going to visit his wife who was in the military in Japan. He was taken off the plane just before it left in Hawaii. It stopped there for refueling. He was given no explanation as to why he was on a no-fly list. He had been vetted by the FBI. He had been vetted by TSA. He had been given passes to work as a transportation worker just prior to his trip, and yet they pulled him off. They would not tell him why he was on a no-fly list. Eventually, he got back with pressure from the military, and still never heard as to why he was put on this no-fly list. See, that's the problem that we have. That's what everybody should be concerned about, whether they're Republican or Democrat, left or right. The idea that we have a government that can operate in secret. This is not like a police state. This is a police state. This is something out of Kafka, out of East Germany, out of the Stasi. You cannot have a situation where you have secret warrants going out after people and you're not allowed to know if you're on the list or why you're on the list or if you ever get off of the list. Well, this is a story that's up on InfoWars today from Kurt Nimmo. Federal court strikes down no-fly list as unconstitutional. The freedom to travel is considered an unenumerated natural right. That's right. The Ninth Amendment says that, the 10th Amendment say, hey, if we left something out, we still have those rights. And just because it's not there specifically doesn't mean that we don't possess that right. Now, this is a federal court in Portland, Oregon. They said that the no-fly list is unconstitutional because it violates a right to due process. Exactly. But they're modifying our Constitution, they say, by using this secret FISA court. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1970s was put in place to stop precisely the type of thing that they're using it for. That's the way the government gets around these things. They had the church committee hearings where they were talking about how the CIA was getting to be an out of control. They pointed out how it was out of control in so many different areas. They were very concerned that the CIA and the federal government in general was going to start spying on Americans. So they created this Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to say, You cannot spy on Americans without going before this court and getting a warrant and everything. And yet, what they're doing is they're using that very court, that secretive court, which is not a court at all. Because in a court, you have openness. In a court, you have presumption of innocence before you're proven guilty. In a court, you have an adversarial relationship. So you're not only told that you're being scrutinized or tried in absentia or whatever, which is what they're doing, secretly trying people in absentia, you have an advocate there in that court. You have somebody arguing for your side of the case. That doesn't happen in the FISA court. In the FISA court, it's done in secret. There is one judge, no jury, no defense attorney, simply a judge and somebody from the administration saying, we want to do this or that to that person or follow that person. And as they're going through these various quote-unquote cases, as they make their secretive rulings, which we're not allowed to see, they're maintaining the fiction that their court rulings are modifying the Constitution. I would say, along with Jefferson, that the idea that the courts, any courts, including the Supreme Court, are modifying the Constitution with their decisions is one that is going to destroy our country. For the longest time, I mean, we can look at this court case and we can say, what a wonderful thing here that the Supreme Court has now affirmed the Fourth Amendment. That's nice. But we have to understand that we have, by ignoring this, given over to the Supreme Court essentially an implied power to modify our Constitution, which is really, really dangerous, as we've seen over and over again, because they have, in many cases, given incredible power to the police state. And we've seen Scalia essentially echoing Hillary Clinton, where she was saying, well, you know, rights, anybody that maintains that the Second Amendment is an absolute right is terrorizing the public. See, she's that close to calling people who believe that the Second Amendment is a right and not a government privilege, because that's what it means when you say it's absolute. You say it's a right. It's a God-given right. It's not something that they can infringe, that they can incrementally move upon and take away little pieces of it. When you say that, she says that you're terrorizing people. She's implying that you're a terrorist. And yet we've seen one of the so-called conservative judges, Scalia, say essentially the same thing. He says, if the Fourth Amendment were an absolute right, then you wouldn't have the TSA. To which I say, it is an absolute right. It's not a privilege. The TSA doesn't need to be there, and we don't need to have Supreme Court justices rewriting the Constitution.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.